Let's talk about what a questionnaire is made up of. The basic building block of a questionnaire is called an item. It is either a question or a statement that an individual filling out the questionnaire gives a response to. We use the term item because rather than question because oftentimes the things you see in a questionnaire aren't really questions. They're statements, or sometimes they are a bunch of things people have to rank or pick from. So question isn't the most accurate word. Instead, we very frequently we will call it an item. And that is what a building block of a questionnaire is. And we're going to look at plenty of different examples of items in just a moment. Items make up measures. A measure is simply an item or a group of items that we use to measure a variable. If you want to get a better idea of what a measure is, let's think of some mundane examples. A piece of tape with inches on it can be used to measure height or circumference of things or length of things, right? A scale is the measure of weight. A thermometer is a measure of temperature. Well, with many things in communication, you can't really use devices to measure things. Sometimes you can, like if you're trying to look at people's heart rate after exposure to scary movies, then you would use a heart rate monitor. In most cases, however, you will simply have items or lists of items that are going to be geared at capturing a specific variable. And measures can consist of just a single item, just one question or statement, and that's what we call a single item measure. Or sometimes, in fact most of the time, measures are made up of more than one item. They are made up of a whole list of items. And in that case, we call them multiple item measures, or we often call them scales or indices. So frequently you're going to see the word the scale, measuring this or that. And in that case, it just simply means a list of items that is used to measure something. So let me give you some examples. First, the single item measures. Here you have two examples. The first measure looks at age. All you need to do is you ask one question, right? What is your age in years? And you can have a space here for a person to write their answer. So this is a single item. You can also think of an item as whatever a person gives a single response to. That's an item. Race or ethnicity. That's another example of a single item measure because all you need is asking one question. What is your primary racial or ethnic background? Please circle African, Asian, Native American, Caucasian, Latin, or other, and a person has the chance to write their background here. This is a digression, but people very frequently get frustrated if somebody tries to pigeonhole them into one of these categories, and understandably so. Many of us have multiracial backgrounds, so trying to be placed in one of the categories sometimes is very difficult. And so that's why it's good to have this other option that gives people a possibility to say in their own words where they fall in terms of their ethnic or racial backgrounds. So these are examples of single item measures, measures made up of only single statement or question, and they require only a single response. Many concepts in communication, though, are so complex and so multidimensional, it's just not enough to ask one question or include one statement that the person responds to capture them. One example of such multiple item measure that was developed in the 70s is a very big measure called the interpersonal attraction scale. This measure simply is used to assess the extent to which somebody is attracted to another person. So if I want to measure your attraction to a certain person in your life, I could use this scale. So the instructions that come in the beginning of the scale are very simple. Please indicate the degree to which you agree or disagree with the following statements as they apply to person X. Here you could fill in the name of the person, or you could change this into as they apply to your best friend or whoever we're trying to measure attraction to. For each statement, please circle the number that best represents your response. And this measure actually looks at 3 different dimensions of interpersonal attraction. And in another unit of this class, we talk about what the dimensions of a concept are. So also, if a concept has multiple dimensions or aspects, a measure of the concept also has to have multiple dimensions. So take good note of this. This is important. The first dimension we look at is the social attraction. The social attraction is sort of a general measure of, or general set of items that look at how attractive that other individual is as a person. So you have 5 different items here. The first one is, I think she or he could be a friend of mine, and you are asked to place yourself on this response option here, anywhere between disagree strongly and agree strongly, and you can circle anywhere from 1, which would represent that you disagree strongly, to 7, which would represent that you agree strongly. So this is sort of a modification of the response formats that we talk about in another section of this class. I guess you could call it a semantic differential format, and again we talk about what that is in a separate section. It would be difficult to meet and talk with him or her. She just wouldn't fit into my circle of friends. We could never establish a personal friendship with each other. I would like to have a friendly chat with him or her. So you can see that these are all tapping into different aspects of whether or not you are attracted to that individual as a person. Some of them are phrased in a favorable way toward the person. Some of these items are phrased in a negative or unfavorable way toward the person, and in each case you're asked to provide your agreement or disagreement. This strategy of providing some favorable and unfavorable statements simply gives you some balance in the measure, makes sure that the person doesn't feel like they're being pushed or led into a specific answer, and it just gives you a better quality of responses. So this is only one dimension of the measure of interpersonal attraction. We're not done at all just yet. The second dimension is physical attraction. As we all know, this is a very important aspect of being attracted to anybody. And so here we have 5 items again. I think she's quite handsome or pretty, depending if it's a female or a male. He or she is very sexy looking. I find him or her very attractive physically. I don't like the way he or she looks. He or she is somewhat ugly. Once again, you have some items phrased favorably, some unfavorably. And once again, this is aimed at giving you a better quality of responses. And if you ask many questions like these, it also reduces the amount of error in your measurement. It gives you more accurate gauge and more accurate perception on how attractive your participant finds this other person. So asking multiple items also serves this purpose of better accuracy. There is a third dimension of this measure. Notice how huge it is. The third dimension, which also has 5 questions, is the task attraction. This is the dimension of how we perceive this person in terms of their ability to perform things. This is something that we very often evaluate people on, and we may be attracted or turned off from a person depending on how they handle their lives and how they handle things around them. So look at these items. He or she is a typical goof-off when assigned a job to do. I have confidence in his or her ability to get the job done. If I wanted to get things done, I could probably depend on him or her. I couldn't get anything accomplished with him or her. She would be a poor problem solver. So all of these are items that are trying to tap into how positively or negatively you evaluate this person in terms of how well they accomplish things. And all these three dimensions, social attraction, physical attraction, and task attraction, add up to give you an overall picture of how attractive this other person is to us. So you see, it's a complex idea. Attraction is a very complex idea, and so it only makes sense to have these many items, to be exact 15 items to measure this. What you would do when you were analyzing this, of course, this would create a lot of data here, and somehow you need to summarize it. We typically average the responses on each of these dimensions. So for example, if somebody circles 5 here, then 2 and 2 and 6 here, and let's say 5 here, you would average the responses in all of these 5 items, and that would give you 4. And so you could say that a person scores 4 on the interpersonal attraction scale dimension task attraction. And you would do the same thing here and the same thing here. So you would end up with 3 numbers for each individual, depending on which dimension we look at. And in some cases you could average those numbers as well to give you one average level of interpersonal attraction. These are some of the things that can be done with multiple item measures. So remember, we use multiple item measures whenever we have a concept that's simply bigger, more complex, so that asking a single question, you could ask, are you attracted to this person? And the person could answer yes or no, but really it wouldn't give you as much insight into the nature of this attraction as this big measure would. So that's why a multiple item measure is better than a single item measure of interpersonal attraction. Now let's talk about the different types of items, so different types of basic building blocks that you can create in your questionnaire. And pay close attention to this because you will be doing this yourself in the survey paper. The first distinction that we make between the types of items you can ask is whether they are open-ended or closed-ended. What's the difference? In open-ended responses, the respondent has complete freedom of what to say. So if you think of test taking, whenever you have a short answer or an essay question, that is what we call an open-ended response. You have a complete freedom of what you want to say. You put your answer in your own words. The other type of responses that's used very frequently in survey questions is the closed-ended response. This is a multiple choice type response, where a person has a limited range of response options that they pick from. They usually circle some number, or they underline some options, or they put a check next to some option, and they provide their response that way. And most multiple choice tests use closed-ended responses. So you pick from answers A, B, C, D, and you pick whichever one you think is the right answer. That is a closed-ended response format. Another distinction is whether the items are direct or indirect. Direct items show clear relationship between what the researcher wants to know and what is being asked. For example, when we go back a little bit, these two are perfect examples of direct items. It is very clear to the participant what I want to know. I want to know your age. I say it here. What is your age in years? The same example, the same cases with the second example, where I ask, what is your primary racial and ethnic background? I say what I want to know explicitly. You know it. And you answer the question. So I'm being very direct. I don't beat around the bush about what it is that I'm trying to find out. In contrast, take a look at some of these items here. Task attraction. Would you know that I am measuring task attraction by looking at these items? Clearly, I'm looking at your perceptions of this person's ability to perform some tasks. But would you know from this that I'm looking at attraction here? I don't say the word attraction anywhere here. I'm kind of skirting the issue and going around it. And so this is a really great example of indirect items. So the concept or variable that I'm trying to measure here isn't explicitly mentioned. Now let's look at some closed-ended response formats. These are the most common. First, we have the basic multiple choice response formats. So, for instance, I'm sure you like ice cream. Probably most of you like ice cream, although I do know people who don't. I love ice cream. And so you might want to find out what people's favorite ice cream flavor might be. And so here is an item with a set of multiple choice options. Please indicate your favorite ice cream flavor. Place a check next to one flavor that you like the most. And you have a bunch of different flavors. And there's even an option for people whose flavor isn't mentioned here, where you can put a check and write the name of your flavor right here. Another type of closed-ended response format, very common also, is called Likert response format. Sometimes people pronounce it Likert. Both pronunciations are fine, whichever one you like better. The Likert format uses basically a bunch of options which are ordered typically according to magnitude, and the person selects from these whatever best represents their response. It will be better easier to understand if I illustrate it with an example. Let's take this item here. Please state the extent to which you agree or disagree with the following statement. Banana Day should be a national holiday. And now here comes your response options. You can mark one of these 5 options, and you can see they are ordered according to intensity, from 1 being disagree strongly to 5 being agree strongly. And you get to circle any one of these that you think best represents your perception of this statement right here. Likert format is also frequently used whenever you are asking about the frequency of doing things. For example, if you want to know how often during a week a person watches the news, you could ask, please indicate how many days a week you watch the news. 1 to 2 days a week, 3 to 4 days a week, 4 to 5 days a week, 6 to 7 days a week, for example. And so very frequently you have these frequency options expressed as a Likert response format. Another closed-ended response format is called Semantic Differential. This response format is based on 2 words or 2 phrases that are complete opposites of each other. So for example, here we have extremely unfair, and at the other end we have extremely fair. And the participant responds by placing a check mark or sometimes circling one of the spaces that you see here between these 2 extremes that sort of expresses this person's position between these 2 extremes in terms of their opinion. Sometimes instead of spaces, we have numbers here, but it's the same principle. So this example says, please indicate your perception of the letter grade system by checking the space that best represents your position between the 2 extremes. And then you have a statement that you want the person to respond to. The letter grade system is extremely unfair or extremely fair, and depending on what you think. If you think it's neither, you kind of would put your check mark here. If you think it's really fair, you could check it here or here. If you think it's really unfair, you could check it here or here, and so on and so forth.